On Amud HaTefilah. This is entry 30. Ois Lamed. So Baal Shem says like this: a person that reads Torah, and we said before that reading Torah, davening, it's all part of the same thing, and really this really extends to all areas in life. But a person is reading Torah, davening, and he sees the oir of the Oisius. He sees the light of the Oisius, which means he's experiencing dveikus, connectivity, attachment to what is beyond the letters. Like we spoke earlier at great length, that the letters are just an expression, a conduit, a container that's holding the light. And a person is davening, a person is learning Torah, and connected, and they see it. They're open to experience the light of the Torah, the Moirish of the Torah. Even if he doesn't understand exactly what he's learning or what he's davening, this will be learning Torah Shabbat, particularly Torah Shabbat. Maybe you do have to understand exactly. But let's say if this is talking about in the case of davening, even if he doesn't understand exactly what the words are saying, since he's reading these words and he's saying it with great ava g'dolah b'slabus, with great love and passion, Hashem is not careful and scrupulous regarding whether he's pronouncing the words exactly correctly. And he gives an example, Baal Shem Tov gives an example of a parent and a child. The child, sometimes a child, that a parent has a tremendous love for their child. And the child is asking something of their parents. So even though the child is a megamgem and he's not saying the words clearly, the father or the parent has tremendous pleasure from what the child is speaking. So what this means is as follows. Sometimes a child asks from a parent something, two people that love each other. We'll use the analogy of a parent and a child, which is a natural instinctive love. And the child is asking the parents of something. So there are two things that are actually happening here. Let's say the child is asking for permission to go out at night, or whatever they're asking for. Let's say it's even a younger child. They're asking for a toy, that the parents should buy them a toy. So there are two things that are happening here. One is that the child is actually saying the words, please, could you buy me this toy? But on a deeper level, what's really happening, what's really occurring here, is that the child is seeking out a revealed relationship with his parent or a parent. So the words, they're expressing in words, they were like a toy. But when a child asks a request of a parent, sometimes it's actually, it's possible that it's actually just, functional, that they actually need a favor to be done for them. But most times when a child is truly asking something from their parent, what they're asking for is, first of all, that their request should be granted. But what's really being asked, or what's really being shown, what's really being demonstrated, is that the child is seeking to have a relationship with the parent. When a child comes to a parent and says, I would like to talk to you about something, besides the thing that they're trying to talk to them about, there's something deeper what's going on, is that the child is seeking to have a connection, a dialogue, an openness with their parents. So there's what is being asked, that's the particular thing that's being asked, but then there's the light that's really shining through, which is the love that the child is trying to awaken within himself or herself towards their parents, and awaken reciprocated love from their parents towards them. That's what's really going on. So the Baal Shem Tov says, when you think about every type of communication, certainly communication between people that are in love with each other, there is always two levels of the reality that's happening. There's one is what is being said, and then there's the why. Why is it being said? Like, what is the light? What is the underlying idea of what's being said? This being said is a particular thing. I want this or I want that from you. But what's really happening is that there's a seeking out, a yearning, a longing to be connected. So therefore, when a parent sees a child coming to them and asks them for something, even if the child is not saying clearly what they want, the parent, if the parent is wise and sensitive and intuitive and understands what the child is really asking, understands that what the child is really asking is not the particular thing. Of course, they also want that particular thing. But what they're really asking, what's the or that's being expressed, is they're seeking a relationship. And therefore, the parents actually have tremendous pleasure. The parents have anah, they have pleasure from this. If it's just about a question, like a vending machine, you put in a quarter and you ask that this drink should come out, and that's what the child is asking from their parents, then there's no hana from the parents. The parents are not having pleasure that the child asks for this, for what they ask for. But the truth is, the child is not asking what they're asking for. They're also asking what they're asking for. What they're really asking for is to have a relationship. They want to be in connection. They want to feel this openness and this love from their parents towards them and them towards their parents. So when the parent sees the child coming to them, even though the child is not actually speaking clearly what they want to say, what they really want is a relationship. And therefore that brings tremendous pleasure. You see this sometimes, certainly with little children, that sometimes if a person was a little child, or a person that has little children, or is around little children, will sometimes notice that sometimes a child just says tati, or dad, or father, or abba, whatever the word that they use, or ima, mother, mom, whatever the word is used. And sometimes the child would just say ta, or dad, and then you would turn around if you're a father, and you would say, yeah, what do you want? And the child actually doesn't want anything. There's nothing particular that they want. What they really want is you. What they're seeking is a relationship. They want to know that you're present with them. They don't want a particular thing. Maybe you're distracted and you're not paying attention to them. What they really want to know is that they're of utmost importance in your life. This is what a child is asking for. This is the depth of the child what's asking for. And therefore it brings tremendous pleasure for the parent to know that they're seeking this relationship. Says the Baal Shem Tov, this is the same thing also with davening, the same thing also with learning. When we say the words of davening, and we say it with tremendous passion, which is the idea of seeing the light of the oisius, which the Baal Shem Tov said before. We learned previously that the oir is the Torah Lishma, is the learning of Torah for the purpose of connection, of dveikus, to be connected to Hashem. So when we say, we read the words of Torah, or we say the words of tefillah, the words of prayer, and we don't say them correctly, in a Kodesh Baruch Hu medaktik, Hashem is not medaktik, Hashem is not scrupulous about exactly how we pronounce it, because Hashem the sensitivity is that Hashem says, I know what you want. I know that you want a relationship. You want to feel love. You want to feel loved. You want to feel that you are loving and you feel loved. And this is what Chazal say, this is what the sages say. That is a degel, a banner of love. And Chazal say, the Medrash says, that don't read the word v'digloi, but v'liguloi. Liguloi means that even a mistake is also love, which means if what you're seeking is a relationship, Hashem says, I know even though the words that are coming out are not correctly and you're not saying them in the best correct form, but I understand that what you really want is to be connected to me, and that can bring me tremendous pleasure. And of course, because there's the pleasure on high of the relationship, then all the requests are granted. It's the same thing like with a child and a parent. If a child wants something from their parents, but what they really want is a relationship, once a parent feels like the child wants a real relationship, then the parent will give exactly what the child needs. Because that's what the parent wants is really a relationship. The parent doesn't want to become the vending machine that just gives the child what they need in terms of day-to-day life in order to survive. The parents want a relationship. The parents wants to be loved and feel love toward their children, and they do. And the child wants the same thing. And when the child expresses this and says, what I really want is not the particular things that I'm asking for this or the particular thing that I'm asking for that, but what I really want is to be in a relationship with you. And that's the love that I feel connected to you, then all the requests are granted. And this is what Baal Shem says. This is what happens in davening. When a person davens, a person prays, even if they don't pronounce the words exactly correctly and they make a mistake, sometimes with the words, and sometimes there's famous stories of the Baal Shem Tov that there were certain decrees that were broken because someone didn't know how to read the Ivra, the exact translation of the words correctly. But because the person did it with passion, then Hashem, there was tremendous pleasure on a high, because it was a child seeking to have a relationship. And when a child seeks to have a relationship in love, the parent wants to give everything that they have towards their children. And that's the same thing with us on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the same thing as us with Hashem. This is a very fundamental and foundational teaching of the teachings of Chassidus in general, particularly the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which is the quality of Ish Pashut, the quality of a simpleton that just seeks not sophistication, not tremendous understanding, not linguistically understanding exactly what they're saying. They say, I want to be in relationship to Hashem. Maybe I don't have the mind capacity to know the entire Shas Baal Peh, the entire Talmud Baal Peh by heart, and maybe I don't have the mind capacity to figure out every single piece of intricate teachings of Chassidus or Zohar. But I want a relationship, and that's the greatest pleasure. And that's why Ish Pashut, even a very simple person, simple meaning someone that's not necessarily the greatest genius and doesn't have the highest level of IQ, even the simple person could be connected to the light, could be connected to the highest level of Dveikus with Hashem. That's the teaching Lamed. That's 30. Now we'll go to Ois Lamed Aleph, 31. Tzarach ha'adam lishma piv v'leshoyne mikol dibur afilu dibur shus. That a person has to be very careful that the words that they speak, even if the words that they're speaking is not necessarily, God forbid, evil speech, lashon hara, negative speech, even just divrei reshus, just general level of speech, which is like just pleasantries, like saying hello to a person in the street, that the person has to be careful that they shouldn't create a damage in their speech. What is that? What does this mean? Before they pray, before they daven. Ki yadua. So the Baal Shem Tov says like this: Sha'olam nivra de machshava divra ma'aseh. The world was created through the process of thought, speech, and then action. So the way we understand this is that there is the world of thought, then there's the world of speech, and then the world of action. Everything begins with a thought, a certain conception in the mind of an idea. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not conscious, and sometimes it's subliminal, but there is some type of some type of pattern that's created in the mind. Then a person speaks what they're thinking about, and the speech that's spoken is rooted in the thought. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean in a conscious thought. Sometimes a person could speak something, and they're not aware where their words come from. But in order for the person to phrase a certain phraseology, or the person to say a certain thing, it must be that this person already thought this thought previously in their mind. It could be it could be on a very subliminal level, on a very subconscious level, but a person can say things that they never thought about on some level. It doesn't mean conscious thoughts. So first is the thought process. First things exist within the world of the mind, within the brain, within the thought. Then it's expressed in the world of speech. And then it's expressed within the world of action. And everything has to go through these three stages. First is the thought process. Then it's the world of speech. And world of speech could either mean literal speech, that you're actually speaking about it, or you're formulating the idea, which is speech, dibur shel machshava, speech within the thought process itself. And then action. So if you want to do something in this world, let's say you want to build something, first you have a thought about the idea of you want to create it, then you speak about it, or speak about it in your mind, you speak it through in your mind, which is dibur shel machshava, the thoughts, speech within the mind. You think about exactly how you're going to create it, which is the type of speech which exists within the brain, within the mind, and then you actually go ahead and do it. And each one follows the next. So first has thoughts, then is speech, and then is action. So the root of every action is the world of speech. The root of every speech is the world of thought. So reishis hakol hamachshava. So the beginning of everything, really everything begins with a thought. That's why in the teachings of the Baal Shem, and it's pretty clear that this is the way it is that everything exists in the machshava of a person. The person is where their thoughts are, which means that not only is it a conceptual idea that you are where your thoughts are, but you actually literally are where your thoughts are, because we are only our thoughts. And everything originates in our thoughts. Again, not necessarily conscious thoughts and mindful thoughts, but everything exists first in the realm of thoughts. And therefore, speech is an anaf, which is a branch of thought. And maisa, and action, is a branch of speech. Comes along the Baal Shem and says like this: if this is true, that every single action that we do in this world, every single time we're manifesting ourselves in this world, originates from a word, an idea, the way it's conceptualized in thought and speech, but the origin of that speech is where it exists within thought. So therefore, everything originates within thought. If this is the premise, then Adam become mishnasai, since a person, when he wakes up in the morning, every single morning when you wake up, you become a beria chadash, you become a new being. Every single day when you wake up, you're becoming afresh. There's like a tchias hameis, there's a form of a resurrection, that you're being birthed today. There's a new you that's being birthed in this morning. So the im yedaber tchila dvar of divrei reshus, if you're going to speak this nonsensical words or not meaningful words, the Rambam has in the Prayer Amud and obviously has the different levels of speech, meaningful speech, holy speech, beneficial speech. This we're talking about divrei reshus, just general speech. If the first words that you open when you open your mouth are going to be, how's the day going to look like? Just trivial thoughts. Then everything will be rooted on those speeches, on those words that you say. Which means, since every action is rooted in speech and every speech is rooted in thought, so there's the beginning there's the kernel of the idea, and that's the foundation. So all the thoughts that you have throughout the entire day is predicated on the first thought that you have. That's like the flowering of the idea. That's the kernel of the thought that you have, and all the thoughts is a flowering, a development of that particular thought that you have throughout the entire day. There's a ratius of the thought. There's a beginning of that thought, and all the thoughts are based on that thought. If you wake up in the morning and your first thought upon awakening is, today's going to be a terrible day, or today's going to be a very hard day for me. The moment you have that thought, and that's the first thought that you created when you woke up, if that's the first thought that you have, then every other thought that you're going to have throughout the entire day is going to be predicated and founded on that particular thought. And therefore, you're actually going to have a lousy day. Because everything will be founded through this prism, through this lens that you created in the first waking moments that you awoke. This is with regards to the world of thought. The same thing also with regards to the world of speech. If the first waking moments, or the first speech, the first words that come out of your mouth is going to be literally saying this, giving like an affirmation to say today is going to be a lousy day, you literally say this in words, then it's going to be the same thing. All the speech, everything that you're going to manifest in the world of speech, and then certainly within the world of action, will be predicated and founded on those particular words that you say in the morning. This is why it's very important that when a person wakes up in the morning, they have to right away say, Moidani lefanecha. This comes from the Gemara, really, the original idea, and the Yerushalmi. But say there, that's the root of the Moidani that we have, the traditional Moidani that's said by most people around the world. And the Moidani lefanecha means I wake up in the morning, the first thoughts that I have before I even wash my hands, before I do anything, is thank you, Hashem, for returning my soul and for believing in me. If a person wakes up and has that's the first thought that they have upon awakening, and a person is Yizgaber Ka'ari, like this says beginning of Shulchan Aruch, they go to law, a person that's Mizgaber Ka'ari. Mizgaber Ka'ari doesn't mean you jump out of bed very quickly, because jumping out of bed very quickly, the Gemara says, Karv Lamisa. The Gemara says, it's a terrible thing that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't wake up and right away jump out of bed. And the Magen Avraham brings this down. But Yizgaber Ka'ari means you should get up like a lion, means you should get up strong. Not jump out like a crazy person out of bed, but you should get up strongly. This is like if you ever saw a lion waking up. It gets up very slowly, but it gets up very strong. This is Gabakari. You get up in the morning, you're starting to wake up, but the moment you catch yourself that you're conscious and you're awake, and you're aware that you're awake, you immediately think, thank you, the words of gratitude, thanking Hashem for giving us this new day. And you word it, you speak it, you say, Moidani lefanecha. And you allow yourself that the entire day will be founded on a point of gratitude. Baal Shem Tov says this idea that everything is rooted in its origin, and then it's an expression, which means everything's rooted in the first thought. And then the anaf, the expression of that is within speech. And everything is rooted in, every speech is rooted in the first speech that you take, is also really something that's hinted to in the teachings of the Zohar, which Arizal speaks about at length, which is the idea of kivud achagadol, that a person has to have respect for their older sibling, for their older brother, which is part of the mitzvah kabbalah esavicha es l'rabes achicha gadol, that even the older brother, a person has to respect like a parent. Why? Because the older brother, achagadol noito chelik ha'ikri, v'shar achav v'misafim ben avnafim ha'kenu. That similar to this idea that we say that what the Arizal says and what the Zohar says is that the first expression of a parent is in their first child that they have, and therefore all the children, which is the manifestation of them, which parallels the world of their speech, which is another teaching from the Baal Shem, which is the wife is connected to the wife, and a person's children and a person's acquaintances is connected to his machshava divrei ma'aseh, his thoughts, his words, and his actions. So he says when a child is born, the first child is born, they take they have the first koyach of the parents, the first power of the parents, and then everyone else is predicated and based on that. That's why you see older children have strong responsibility and they're more similar to their parents in many ways. Therefore, Baal Shem says, the conclusion of everything that I'm saying is that a person has to make sure that the first words that they speak is holy, is pure, is noble, is refined, is transcendent, and the first thoughts that a person has. And so in order for all the thoughts that come out through the entire day, all the thoughts that you're having throughout the entire day, will be based on those original thoughts that you have. And then all the speech that you're speaking will be based on the first speech, positive, holy, noble words that you spoke about in the morning will be founded on them. And then you certainly pray with joy because it was based on that. And certainly the Baal Shem Tov says, this is a guarantee or a certainty, just like a person purified and sanctified his words and his thoughts, bevadai yana b'tfilasei. Certainly he will be answered. Certainly his prayers will be answered. Why will certainly his prayers be answered? What does it have to do with a person's mekadosh? A person sanctifies his thoughts and his words. Therefore, the first thoughts of the day, the first words that you speak in the morning, certainly his prayers will be answered. Because what it means is, because what does it mean that you're connecting? You're connecting your first original thought to the shoyesh, to its root, to source in kedusha, to its source of holiness. And like the Baal Shem Tov said, what is the idea of kedusha, which we learned previously? What is the idea of kedusha, of holy? Is the idea of the shefa, the giving, the power of a Kadosh Baruch Hu that gives and furthers creation. So if a person connects their first thoughts and first words to the shoyesh, to the source of all life and all giving, that's the idea of kedusha, of sanctity, connects their thoughts. Then when they speak the words in kedusha, in sanctity, with dveikus, then certainly their prayers will have an effect and draw down the shefa, draw down the flow to all the things that they need in their life, begashmis and beruchnis, physically and spiritually. Okay, that is Ois Lamed Aleph. We'll learn one more entry. This is also a very fundamental teaching for the Baal Shem and in Torah's Chassidus, which is found in Tzivas HaRivash. So it says like this. It seems to be two separate teachings, but they're connected. They're the same idea, really. Let's try to understand it. Kol ma sheroya, everything that a person sees, everything that a person experiences, any type of sensation that you're having in this world, whether through sight, through hearing, through smelling, through tasting, through touching, whatever experiencing that you have, Yizkar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a person should remember Hashem. Im Ava if it's love, Yizker is Avas Hashem Yisborach. V'im Yira, if it's love, you should remember the love of Hashem. If a person is feeling fear, Yizker Yiras Hashem Yisborach. Then a person should remember the awe of Hashem. That's the first part of the teaching. What the Baal Shem Tov is saying is like this. Every single emotion that we have is an invitation to have that emotion on the level that we're experiencing it, and to have that emotion even on a deeper level. There's nothing in this world that we're experiencing that doesn't have a spiritual, holy root. Every type of emotion that we're experiencing has a holy root, has something, a pure root. Every type of emotion that we're experiencing, every type of thing that we're seeing and experiencing has a place in Kiddush, has a place in holiness. And the reason why we're experiencing the emotions is so that we can experience emotions to be alive. And ultimately, we can use that emotion to go to its deepest root in holiness. Which means very, very practically, this means like this. A person is feeling very loving, or a person just something trivial, maybe just made some money or just fell into a good relationship, and they're feeling very happy. They're feeling very good about themselves. They're feeling expansive. Comes along the Baal Shem and says, okay, you're experience it fully. You're feeling really, truly joy. Now take that joy and elevate it to an infinite amount of joy. Because if you're having an experience, let's say, of love, and you have love towards a particular person, and you're feeling very strong love towards this particular person, so you are supposed to experience that love to that person, because that will open your heart and will make you expansive. But then take that love that you're feeling for the particular person and then broaden it. Instead of having the experience of love that it was only for that particular person, which is very limiting, because of course the emotion of love is very expansive, but it's very limited to that particular person that you're experiencing love. Let yourself just feel the emotion of love in itself. So of course, direct your love towards the other person, and then sit with the love, what you're feeling, any emotion that you're feeling it, sit with the emotion in itself, divest it from the particular person in the emotion of love in itself, and then allow that emotion to expand into the infinite one, to the love to Hashem, which is infinite. So you're taking a very particular emotion that you're having for a particular person, and you're enlarging the emotion. You're not dismissing that particular emotion that you're having and saying that's not real, or it's not, that's trivial. You're not saying that. You're saying that emotion that you're having in itself, I can now expand it and enlarge it into something much larger. That's in a positive emotion. What if a person is feeling fear? A person's afraid. Which is also an emotion that comes up. A person's, walking someplace where it's, maybe it's there's an uncertainty where they're being, and they're feeling fear. So take that emotion of fear, which is the absence of control. Really, that's what the fear is, that you don't have control of the situation. There's something large in you, and then feel yourself giving up control, transcending your control, or surrendering your control to the ultimate controller of the universe, to Hashem. So the small fear for maybe being robbed of some particular thing, and therefore you're afraid and you're feeling this emotion. It's not saying you're not having this emotion. It's very real to you. Take that emotion and now expand it to have an infinite emotion that's connected to something that's even transcendent than the immediate fear that you're having. And incidentally, the Baal Shem Tov would say is that the moment you transform, let's say if it's a negative emotion like fear, the moment you transform that fear into something that's much larger, all of a sudden you're no longer afraid of that particular situation. The higher yira, so to speak, the higher awe of surrendering of all control to the ultimate controller allows you to let go of all the smaller things that you think you need to control and you can't control, and therefore you're afraid. But what the idea is that you're taking that emotion and you're expanding it. So any type of emotion that you have, any feeling that you're experiencing, experience it and always direct it one step higher, one step deeper. if it's feeling pain, you're feeling scared, you're feeling nervous, you're feeling joy, you're feeling grateful, whatever it is, whatever the experience that you have, expand it. And the expansion is that it is expanding now from emotion from you now to Hashem. You're very grateful. You just made a lot of money. Excellent. Okay, thank you, Hashem. Or be grateful to Hashem. Or say, I'm so grateful for my life and for the life that you created. So there's the emotion that you're having, and then the expansion of emotion. Even sometimes a very, very raw emotion of bitterness and of sadness. Once read a story about a chassid, a very big chassid, in this book called Samarkand by Hillel Zaltzman. He writes about his father, that his father was a big chassidish yid, and at some point he lost his wife, and he was a young man, and the children came to tell the father that he lost his wife, and it was very, very painful because now he had young kids, and it was during the war times, and he was sitting in the back of his house and he was crying, terrible, terrible crying, and the children started becoming worried about their father because it seemed like he was taking it too seriously and he was going to collapse, and they started engaging him, asking like, "Can we do anything?" And the father said something fascinating, which is a very Chassidic way of thinking about this, is that he said that he was sitting there alone and he felt such pain and such sadness that he never felt in his life. And then, while he's sitting with the sadness for the loss of his wife, he said that he was sitting there and he thought to himself, why did Hashem allow, what is a way to transform this or to direct it? What is Hashem telling me that I can, what does it mean to have this type of emotion? And he started internalizing the emotion of this tremendous sadness that he was feeling into his own personal life in terms of his own avodas Hashem and service of Hashem, and saying that this sadness he can actually direct also, not that it should dismiss or to belittle the other type of sadness, but to take that sadness also and say, about his own life, about his own journey, of his own spiritual qualities, which means that he was taking a very raw emotion that he was feeling and saying, how could I use that very emotion also for avodas Hashem, to service Hashem, to make me into a better person, into a more refined person. This is what the Baal Shem Tov is saying. That every single thing that we see and experience in this world, even things that seem to be the opposite of everything that can be furthering and holy and noble and spiritual and meaningful, every single experience that we have and every single emotion that we have, we can take that emotion and we can be in the emotion in itself, in its particular container and very definite structure and in its very particularity, or we can expand it into something much larger and to but to open up that emotion to something that's much larger. So that's the first very important understanding of Baal Shem. This is not Halah Samid, this is not the elevation of thoughts. That's in Teres HaMagid. This is in the teachings of the Magid. This is not Halah Samid, this is the midah in itself, feeling it and saying, how could I direct this now to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? To Hashem. Then the Baal Shem says something else. Vafilu kishohoylech lebeis hakisei, even if a person has to go to relieve themselves, a person has to constantly be connected to Hashem. So even there, a person could create a yichud, create a unification. This is a very tremendous novelty and chiddush in the teachings of the Baal Shem. In the teachings of the Arizal, there is a lot of different types of yichudim, different unifications, which means mostly they're done with mitzvahs, particular mitzvahs that you do. When you shake a lulav, there's a particular intention that you do, and you're creating this type of yichud, this type of divine unification between the upper and lower realms, or between this name of Hashem and this name of Hashem. The Baal Shem Tov is going to say that yichudim, this idea of unification, to always be conscious and aware of Hashem, to know Hashem in every single aspect in your life, has to be every single aspect in your life. Not just when you do a mitzvah, and not when you're doing something that's anything, everything you're doing. So the extreme example that the Baal Shem Tov will give, and he does give, is the idea of going to relieve yourself in the bathroom. Because that was considered the place where Tzimtzum Kipshutai, maybe Tzimtzum is literal and Hashem is not in that present in that place. But this is what the Baal Shem Tov says. Even there you can do Yichud, even there you can do this unification. But the other Chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov here is that in the teachings of the Baal Shem, the process of Yichud is not cerebral, it's not in the mind, it's not a mindful process. In the practice of the Arizal, you're doing a particular mitzvah, so you're blowing the shofar, or you're shaking a lulav, and in your machshava, in your thought, in your kavanah, in your attention, in your mindset, you're doing a physical act, and you're having intention of some type of spiritual unification that's occurring between upper and lower worlds while you're doing this physical act. The Baal Shem Tov is going to say that everything is not just in the mind, it's not just the way it's not an overlay of thought on the experience, but in the teachings of the Baal Shem, the experience itself allows for the expression of the Yichud. So what that means is as follows. Here's the way he phrases it in terms of a person relieving themselves. When a person relieves a Yachshav ad haloi ani mafrid ra min hatoiv, hatoiv yishel lovidasei, l'shem shamayim. What is lovidasei's baruch? When a person relieves himself and goes to the bathroom, there's a physical activity that a person is doing. There's a physical action that a person is doing. The physical act of what a person is doing after they eat is that certain nutrients becomes part of Dam Basar K'Bsar, becomes part of your blood and flesh and blood, which are the healthier parts or the better parts that can be assimilated within the body. And then there are parts that are ejected, which is the parts that are toxic or dead cells, whatever is being released when a person relieves himself, which is that those are the parts that are no longer needed in the body, or there's no purpose for them in the body. So what you're doing physically, the physical act of relieving a person, when a person relieves himself, is that they're elevating or integrating the sparks or something that's positive within their body, which becomes part of them, and they're expunging the parts that are no longer needed in their body or not assimilated fully properly in the body and has to be expunged. So the act of doing this is a physical, visceral action of what you're doing is the idea of the yichud. This is what the idea of the unification is, the awareness that this physical act of relieving a person relieving themselves, this physical action, what you're actually doing, is a type of unification because you're getting rid of the bad and you're assimilating the good. That's the mafrid and ramen atoyev. You're separating the good from the bad. That in itself is the process of what a person is going to the bathroom. So every single action that a person is doing, even physical action that the body is doing on its own, and sometimes it's even more so, it shows up more because the body can actually feel the sensation in a visceral way, in a very tangible way, is that the mere act of doing certain physical actions, the action in itself represents a type of refinement which triggers a certain mindset. So it's not the mindset is overlaid on the experience, but the experience actually triggers the mindset to understand that in life, there are certain things in life that I have to integrate, and those become part of me and in a healthy way, and certain parts of life, certain things in areas of my life, which is better if I let go of and I expunge from my system, or certainly don't even partake in them to begin with. And that in itself is a yichud. So that's another very, very fundamental teaching. And these two teachings of the Baal Shem Tov in this Sivas HaRivosh are actually connected. The first part of the teaching, which is that every single action, every single emotion has a root, a positive root, and even going to the bathroom, it's part of the same idea. There's nothing that is devoid of Avodas Hashem, of serving God Hashem. There's nothing really devoid of Hashem. Everything is part of Hashem's world, and everything within it can help us and assist us to become closer and closer to Hashem, and that way become closer and closer to ourselves, and become closer and closer to all those around us. So it helps us on a vertical level between us and God, us and the Creator, higher, and on an expansive horizontal level between us and interpersonally. And that is another foundational teaching of the Baal Shem. You should have a wonderful week.